lateness of the class. We've had technical issues that we've been trying to sort out. So let's quickly move to our business for today, where we are going to be talking about the main branches in philosophy. I thought we would have been able to do a recap of last week, but we don't have that time again. So let's talk about the branches straight away. Philosophy, as we discussed, seek clear, distinct, and comprehensive understanding of reality. This makes philosophy ask a lot of questions. We inquire, we try to know so many things. So to answer these questions, philosophers group them according to their nature, to their scope, and to their focus. This gives rise to different branches of philosophy. So the main branches of philosophy that we have 4 main branches. There are some writers who list it as 5, some will call 7, but whether 5, whether 7 or more, the main branches of philosophy can always be grouped under these 4 branches of philosophy, namely metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and logic. So the 4 main branches of philosophy are metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and logic. Metaphysics is called the science of being qua being. That is the science of being as being. Metaphysics studies reality in its most comprehensive scope and fundamental principles. It is a science that tries to determine the real nature of things. So the term metaphysics was coined by Andronicus of Rhodes, who was one of the commentators of Aristotle's work. Like, perhaps we can mention later, Aristotle served like a watershed in the history of philosophy. His propositions and his ideas in philosophy were so vast that several branches of knowledge. In his research, Aristotle talked about several physical sciences like biology, like chemistry, like astrology, all these other physical sciences. Aristotle had several writings on them. So this commentator of Aristotle's work, Andronicus of Rhodes, he grouped all the works of Aristotle under the physical works. I mean, those that fell under chemistry, he grouped them under chemistry. Those that fell under physics, he grouped them under physics. Those that fell under biology, he grouped them under biology. Those that fell under the social sciences, he grouped under social sciences. But then he still saw that there were some writings of Aristotle that he didn't know where to group them. So he now called these ones metaphysica, that these issues are beyond the physical. So that's where the word metaphysics came in, metaphysica. It's a Greek word that means beyond the physical. So for the sake of definition, metaphysics is defined as the investigation into the nature of reality and the structure of what exists. It raises fundamental questions. Yes, so because the issues that Aristotle dealt with in these subdivisions were, like we noted, not under the physical things. So these issues are some fundamental questions. For instance, the questions include, why is there something rather than nothing? What is the source of the being of all things? Why does what is the nature of man? So these questions and these discussions that Aristotle had, because in his discussion, Aristotle talked about the problem of substance, appearance, and reality, the problem of sense, of free will and determinism, the problem of human destiny. All these problems, of course, we know cannot be grouped under chemistry or biology or physics as we have them in our physical sciences. So these are the issues that Aristotle discussed under, or these are the issues that Andronicus of Rhodes now under what he called metaphysics. Another main branch of philosophy is epistemology. Epistemology is coined from 2 Greek words, namely episteme and logos. Episteme and logos. Episteme means knowledge. Episteme means knowledge, and logos could mean the theory of, the science of, the study of, or a discourse on. These are the several meanings of logos. So that's why when put together, episteme is called a theory of knowledge. Epistemology, rather, is called a theory of knowledge, because epistemology studies the nature, origin, foundation, method, the validity, the extent, and the limit of human knowledge. Let me take that again. Epistemology studies the nature, origin, foundation, method, validity, extent, and limits of human knowledge. It asks some fundamental questions. For instance, what does it mean to say we know something? How does knowledge differ from belief? You may say you know something and you may believe in something and you just think because you believe in it, you know about it. So what is the difference between truly knowing something and just believing in such a thing? What is the source of our knowledge? Can we know anything for certain? How do we even know we have gained knowledge? These are part of the fundamental questions that are asked by epistemology. How do we justify our claims to knowledge? So these are some of the issues that are dealt with under epistemology as a branch of philosophy. And then there are three main schools of thought that provide answers to these questions that we listed above. These are skepticism, rationalism, and empiricism. These schools of thought in epistemology also serve as sources of knowledge, and they try to answer the questions that we've asked concerning knowledge. Skepticism doubts the possibility of knowledge. The skeptics, they doubt the possibility of knowledge. They say, for instance, one of the skeptics, notable skeptics that we have is Protagoras. Protagoras said that man is the measure of all things, that of the things that are, that they are, and of the things that are not, that they are not. So he doesn't accept the certainty of knowledge. Rather, he sees knowledge as something that is relative to the individual. So my own belief in a particular thing as knowledge is different from what you believe as knowledge, according to Protagoras. Then Gorgias is another notable skeptic. He even claimed totally that it is impossible for us to know anything. That's what Gorgias said. And he said, even if we now know something, we cannot communicate such things, such knowledge. So in his own view, knowledge was impossible. So that is one school of thought. Skepticism is a major school of thought in epistemology that doubts or denies the possibility of knowledge. Then the other two schools of thought came to counter skepticism. Rationalism and empiricism came to counter skepticism, that no, knowledge is possible. But in countering skepticism, both rationalism and empiricism now took different paths. For instance, rationalism claims that knowledge is derivable through reason, intuition, introspection. For the rationalist, we can gain knowledge, we can acquire knowledge only through human reasoning, through our intuition, through introspection, anything that doesn't have to do with perception. That's what the rationalists believe. And the notable rationalists from the modern period include René Descartes, Leibniz, and Spinoza. Then the third school of thought, which is empiricism, like I noted, it agrees with rationalism that knowledge is possible, but it does not agree with rationalism on how knowledge is possible. So the empiricists hold that knowledge is derived through sense experience. It is only through sense perception, according to the rationalists, that we can come to acquire knowledge. So that is why it is through our sense organs that the rationalists believe that we can come to know anything. So notable rationalists include John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume. Some of these philosophers, they have some popular sayings in their attempt to justify their positions. For instance, John Locke says that at birth, the human mind is tabula rasa. That the human mind, the mind of the child, the mind of the baby is tabula rasa. And tabula rasa means it's an empty slate, that knowledge only comes on it through impression. It is whatever we teach it that knowledge, that now becomes knowledge for it. That's the only way through which it knows. Another philosopher, George Berkeley, he said that esse est participe. George Berkeley said esse est participe, that to be is to be perceived. To be is to be perceived. Esse est participe. So anything, according to Berkeley, that cannot be perceived definitely does not exist. In other words, he's buttressing his fact that it is only through sense perception that we can come to acquire knowledge. We move on to ethics, to a third branch of philosophy, which is ethics. Etymologically, ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos, which means custom or a customary or acceptable way of acting. That's what ethos means, the root word of ethics. Ethics is also known as moral philosophy, and it concerns itself with the rightness, wrongness, or other issues that relate to evaluating human conduct. Ethics, also known as moral philosophy, concerns itself with rightness, wrongness, and other issues related to evaluating human conduct. Ethics studies the basic principles of moral behavior and is concerned with what is right and what is wrong in human behavior, as well as dealing with how men ought to behave and why it is right or wrong to behave in certain other ways. So in other words, ethics is concerned with our behavior, concerned with human conduct, concerned with our relationship with others within the society. Ethics also asks some fundamental questions, like we have noted in metaphysics, we have also noted in epistemology. There are some fundamental questions that are asked by each of these branches of philosophy, and it is in an attempt to answer these questions that these branches of philosophy are further explored. So for instance, the fundamental questions that ethics asks include: why must I live a moral life? Why is a good action commendable and a bad action condemnable? What constitutes the good life? Is there a universal way of acting, or is right or wrong a matter of individual judgment? Is being right or wrong a relative thing? Is it limited to the individual or the beliefs of such individual? Are actions right in themselves or a matter of consequences? So these are some of the fundamental questions that are asked in ethics. And in answering these questions, ethics is divided into three broad areas, namely normative ethics, meta-ethics, and applied ethics. Normative ethics deals with judgment, as normative ethics as a branch of ethics or a school of thought in ethics, deals with judgments and how people ought to behave. It concerns itself with the norms, principles, and standards of human conduct. Meta-ethics, that's M-E-T-A, ethics. Meta-ethics is the critical analysis of meanings of ethical terms and statements. So just as ethics is telling us how we ought to behave, ethics is also analyzing and critiquing itself on the terms and the concepts that are used in ethics. And then the third branch of ethics is applied ethics. Applied ethics is the application of ethical theories to everyday experiences. For instance, is this right? Is euthanasia right or wrong? That's euthanasia is mercy killing. Or is abortion right or wrong? Is capital punishment right or wrong? Different scholars will come from different perspectives to try and justify each of these situations that we find ourselves in the society. So it is ethics approaches these issues using some ethical theories. So that's the function of applied ethics, bringing these ethical theories that have been developed into everyday issues in our society. Then quickly, let's move to the fourth main branch of philosophy, and that is logic. Logic is the study of the general structure of sound reasoning and good argument. Logic is the general structure of sound reasoning and good argument. Its job is to determine the soundness. And when we talk about soundness, that is validity or unsoundness, invalidity of our arguments. Logic comes from the Greek word logos, which means seasoned discourse, reasoned discourse, reasoned discourse. Logic is an instrumental branch of philosophy where philosophers make their positions clear, well articulated, and properly backed up. Their reasoning are also made precise, cogent, and coherent. That's why, for instance, you share the discussion that no, that your argument is not logical. Your argument is not logical enough, and we cannot get what you are saying. So there are two main subdivisions under logic. We have inductive logic and deductive logic. Inductive logic and deductive logic. Deductive logic, which comes from deductive argument, is one in which the conclusion is inferred from its premises by a natural, necessary, and syllogistic deduction. In a deductive argument, we can easily deduce the conclusion from the premises. For instance, an example of a logical of a deductive argument is all Olabisi Onabanjo students are serious students. Dele is a student of Olabisi Onabanjo University. Therefore, Dele is a serious student. So the conclusion of Dele being a serious student comes from the premise that all Olabisi Onabanjo students are serious. So Dele being a student of Olabisi Onabanjo definitely follows that he's a serious student. Then the other type of argument are the inductive argument. And this is one in which the premises only provide probable grounds for the acceptance of the conclusion. Probable ground. The ground is not certain, it's not conclusive, because it is only acceptable to the extent that we can deny it. For instance, if we say that, okay, I saw a swan. I believe we know what a swan is. It's a white bird, I saw a swan in Ibadan and it's white. I saw a swan in Agowe and it is white. I saw a swan and in Ijebu-Ode and it is white. Therefore, all swans are white. Well, we will accept that conclusion until when we see a swan that is not white. The moment we see a swan that is not white, it destroys the whole premises that have been coming up and trying to prove to us that all swans are white. So that is why it is said that an inductive argument is one in which the premises only provide probable grounds for the acceptance of its conclusion, rather than certain grounds as done in the deductive logic. So these are the main branches of philosophy. But quickly, there's another important branch of philosophy that we call the philosophy of infrastructure of other disciplines. In other words, what philosophy is doing here is that philosophy is interrogating and investigating what other disciplines are doing. Mind you, philosophy is taken as the mother of all disciplines. Everything we learn everything we know, it's every field of knowledge that we have evolved from philosophy. So that's why philosophy is taken as the mother of all disciplines. And philosophy does not just leave these disciplines. Philosophy tries to check them and check their activities. So that is why there are four reasons why philosophy keeps on investigating other disciplines. Why? First, philosophy is capable of supplying logical and epistemological tools for the evaluation of the methods and procedure of other disciplines. Second, philosophy is capable of verifying whether the methods and techniques used by other disciplines is appropriate for the subject and focus of that discipline. Third, philosophy has the capacity to unfold the basic metaphysical presuppositions of other disciplines. And finally, philosophy has that ability to delimit the precise boundary of each discipline and thus ensure that those disciplines do not encroach on other subjects matter. So examples of philosophy of other disciplines are philosophy of science, philosophy of social sciences, philosophy of education, philosophy of law, philosophy of religion, philosophy of technology. All these, philosophy is trying to investigate and interrogate what these disciplines are doing. So that's why it's called philosophy of other disciplines. And on a parting note, you would also note that philosophy of any discipline is the peak of knowledge. If you first get your first degree in philosophy, you get your master's in this philosophy, the peak of any knowledge that you can get is a PhD, a doctor of philosophy in that discipline, which means you have come back home to the mother discipline of philosophy by getting to the peak of that philosophy. So these are the main branches and the sub-branch of philosophy. So I believe we have been able to have an understanding of this in our course, starting late because of technical issues. Good morning. Good morning, sir.
Good morning,
hello,
sir.
Sir. Can you hear me?
I'm Richard, sir. Good morning, sir. So is the class over now?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Is the class over now?
Yes, the class is over. Yes.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
So next week, by God's grace, we'll make sure that we start the class on time so that we can cover more.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you.
For the class.